Welcome back and thank you for staying with us on Daybreak. So to discuss more on yesterday's president's speech, we have in the studio Abdul'aziz. He is the Senior Special Assistant to President Tinubu on print media. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you. We also have Afolabi Adekaiyaja. I hope I pronounced his name, from Center for Democracy and Development. Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. Also joining us via Zoom is Dr. Bamayi. He is a writer and social entrepreneur and also development strategist. All right, I think he's not ready, but then let's come back to the studio. It's good to have you, gentlemen. Starting from you, Abdul'aziz. We saw not the president come out to address, which is we give him kudos for listening to the people, because there's been a call for him to come out to address the nation based on the concerns, which is end bad governance and hunger strike and all of that. But people seem to be disappointed with the president's speech. Give us a reason why you think the speech was okay at this point.
People seem to be disappointed. That was quite very
Nigerians
subjective.
clearly have.
No, that was a very subjective statement.
It is not subjective. It is clear.
It is subjective because there were people.
Clear.
Excuse me, you have asked your question. There were people who were also really happy with it because there were people who came out to commend him for it. You understand? So to say that people
commend him for what?
For the speech, for coming out to say what he said. So we are not all from the same prisms. So if you or some other people are looking at things from a certain prism, it's not good to generalize. Generalization is not good. And I think especially for media, we should always be specific. If you say so person or so group have picked or have expressed disappointment, I will have no problem with that. But to say people is generic.
All right.
So what I'm saying is that, well, let's come back to the question. This is democracy. And as you said, there were calls that the president should come out and address the nation. The president should come out and address the nation. And he had to do that as a Democrat, even though there were people, even in the public domain, who felt there was no need because of two reasons. One is that, as we have said from the very beginning, this was something of, it was a protest that was really something of a ragtag protest, if I am to use that term, because in as much as we agree, and nobody in this government ever, denied that there is hardship in the land. No one ever denied that, and we sympathize, all of us, the president is not happy with that turn of events. But then the protest in itself was something that was that had no clarity in terms of leadership, in terms of organization, in terms of demands. And then, for example, even the hashtag end bad governance. What does ending bad governance mean? So then there was no coherence, you understand. And then at the end, and that was what government kept trying to dissuade people, trying to point out that yes, we know there is problem, but please, this is a very precarious situation and things could go south. That it's better to dialogue, it's better to follow certain things because of what has happened on Tuesday and on Thursday and Friday in some places. Because we for any protest, for any mass action that has no coherence, no specific demand and organization, there is a strong possibility of people, miscreants, taking advantage of it and unleashing mayhem, which unfortunately was what happened at the end. And when at the end people came out, our worst fears were confirmed. And also, secondly, and that was part of the reason why some people felt, why should the president address, for example, because at the end, all the people that were tweeting and pushing all these things behind the keyboard, when it was the D-Day, no one of them.
I'll come back to that because I still don't. You still did not give me the answer that I was aiming for. Anyways, but back to you.
You can come back to the question.
Yes,
again.
we'll definitely come back to that. Back to you, Afolabi. Let's hear your first reaction when you heard the president's speech.
So I think, first of all, one challenge that we have is that the bar in governance is very low. right? Because the fact that we're even praising the president for coming out to speak is even a problem, because essentially you have thousands of Nigerians who came out across the country to protest, to mention the fact that things are not going quite well. So obviously, even any civil politician should engage. Should say, okay, fine, this is what's going on. Let me actually try and listen, and let me try and make sure that the citizens actually assuage their concerns. I think when it came to the speech, one of the biggest issues is that there was no clear identification in terms of how to actually address bad governance. Now, the SSC has mentioned rightly the fact that there was no clear promise when it came to the process. If you go back to 2020 and end SARS, it was very clear, end the SARS group. If you go even to Kenya, I mentioned the recent protest, it was close the finance bill. But then here, there was no clear action. So there's a very good point there that because there was no clear demand, the question now becomes, how do you measure that the protests have actually been successful? How do you know when to go back home? But then this is now where the challenge now comes in terms of the government being very introspective about the communications and the optics. You have the largest government in Nigerian history at the same time that you're telling citizens to deal with austerity measures. You have reports of either procuring new presidential aircraft at the same time when you know that citizens are dealing with the highest inflation rate in recent years. So there's still the balance in knowing that, okay, fine, there are some low-hanging fruits that can be carried out easily. There's a very clear identification that, look, we know where the issue is, and we know that by virtue of our position as government, we might not feel the same pangs that people are feeling, but we will try to engage with that. And I think ultimately the biggest miss for the president's speech was the fact that he did not identify the fact that some citizens had been wrongly killed. Some citizens were shot. Some people were,
Did you really read that
were attacked. I did. I listened to the speech. I read the speech.
From the very beginning.
Come back
No,
to
I read the
beginning. No. This is misinformation.
No, because the point.
Excuse me, Afolabi.
No, I was not speaking. I was speaking, and I was engaged.
Paragraphs.
I was speaking and I was engaged. Because the point
he mourned
really,
people who were
because the point I'm stressing is the fact that even if there was no omission there, the president should have rightly mentioned that, look, we will ensure that we investigate the processes that go on. We will make sure that the police and the army and the different agencies actually make sure that they get to what happened and investigate why this could take place in a peaceful protest. Right? The president didn't make any cases in that regard, which means that you have citizens right now who don't know if they can actually come out and say anything because they don't know how the government or how the forces will respond. So that's where the gap was.
All right, we'll return on that conversation. But speaking on what the president did not address, which I'm sure you already have concerns based on what Afolabi said, is the fact that not only Afolabi, we saw renowned writer Wale Shinka called out that clause, saying he did not see the president talking about the people that were killed. We saw SAN Falana also address that, saying we know the president came and said, oh, I commiserate with the people that died, but the president did not say why the protesters had to be shot with live ammunition. So is you are from the president's camp. Is there any way to address this, or is there any possible reasons why the president removed that or did not include that in his speech?
No, as I said, people died, unfortunately, and it was not the wish. It was not like an agenda, or nobody set out to kill people. And mind you, and that is one sad thing when we're talking about governance or civil and security sector relations. We always tend to ignore that the other people also have lives, and some of them have been killed. I'm talking about security men, policemen were killed, not only in one place. In Kaduna, we've seen that. We've seen that, I think, in Bauchi and some other place. And, even yesterday, 2 days ago in Kano, they beat the DPO, chased away, ransacked the police station. Something happened in Nyanya, and they set the police station ablaze. So do you mean that these are peaceful protesters? There is a line between rioters and protesters. There is a line between protest and riot. What we've seen that led to this unfortunate death, where people going berserk, going out of control, looting and all that. It's not like peaceful. For example, in Abuja, people gathered, and nobody was killed in the city center where people gathered. In Lagos, people gathered. In Jos, people gathered. So it's unfortunate that most times human rights activists and media tend to lump up some of these
Speaking
things.
of media, we were expecting the president to address. Also, there was major attack on journalists during this protest, and as much as, of course, the media did a justice to this on being unbiased. Let's be honest. I will not tolerate you putting it out as though the media has been the one pushing an agenda, because the media tried to say.
Why are you so defensive even before?
Not defensive, not defensive. You stated something. The media has tried to be unbiased, saying that while even these protesters are not only going out to protest on behalf of themselves, but on behalf of Nigerians as well.
Or biased.
No, they were not. They were not. We just have to put it out there. But the president did not address that as well. There's a lot of gap that the president did not address. You will agree with everyone at this point.
Excuse me, there is no perfect speech. Let me tell you, I was part of the process that led to the speech that was released to the public. I know that even to the very end, changes, which is normal for any speech writing.
The president
Excuse me, let me land. You have asked your question. The changes had to be made again and again. So there is no perfection. Even you, if you write something, if you go back to it 1 hour later, you can still make changes. So there is no issue of a speech that has answered all the questions or addressed all the issues. It's humanly impossible. But then coming back to the issue you raised about, the media and all that. I still consider actually myself a media person, a journalist for that matter. And we know there are risks associated with our work. Someone was killed on the front, not only one. For example, my friend Enenche was killed in Kano during 2012 Boko Haram attack, mistakenly on crossfire. So there are things that there is a difference between deliberate action to molest and all being caught in a melee of a crisis or something like that. For example, if we had seen people come here to say, oh, we are not happy with, which, for example, previous government would have done that. For example, to say, Arise TV, you have been critical, or Daily Trust, you've been so critical, let's come and, so let's send troops to go and picket the place or ransack the place. That didn't happen. Even this issue, I am telling you, even though that you are trying to be defensive and say that I shouldn't say that, the truth of the matter is that what is giving this oxygen, and people forget, there are examples. It is really sweet as journalists. We like covering news that is happening, trend, following the trend. But I always say that responsible media is just like leadership. Does not necessarily mean following the people. Always try to show the people the right path. And what we've seen is that media are so agog, so enthusiastic about giving, giving oxygen. Excuse me, I have to make a point.
The point has already been made.
Excuse me, media space is a marketplace of ideas. You have said your own, he has said. Allow me to land, to make the point. The point is not made.
The issue is that the media, we are moving out from the main point.
No, because you made the point, and I'm responding to that. The media really gave oxygen, created mount out of molehill. I know there are issues, but then what I'm talking about, all these issues of, for example, the point you've made about killings and all that, conveniently nobody has, we have not seen pictures or even videos of the Enya police station that was set ablaze. Or even the video from Kaduna, apart from on some WhatsApp groups of so-called protesters chasing after policemen. And thankfully, those policemen were really, exercised a lot of discretion by not shooting. You could see, one of them even cocked the gun, but he just, abandoned the thought and they had to run for their lives. And a lot of these places, for example, in Kano, the person or two people that were killed around the government house was as a result of of going out of hand, vandalizing, and even looting a nearby supermarket. So we have to put things in proper perspectives. There are no issues of sentiments. We can still drive the point without sensationalizing or being really subjective about some of these things. Let's, blame government where government needs to be blamed. Government is not unblemished, But then let's also say things properly. To assume that peaceful protesters were killed and then the president didn't talk is not correct. And also, as I said, policemen were also killed.
Indeed. All right, Afolabi, let's talk about the government accountability when it comes to decisions that they've made. We saw a lot of policies being made by the present administration that has affected Nigerians and caused and brought us to this point. But I don't know if it was me. You definitely went through the speech. There was no accountability. Like, I know what caused it. There was more of it was a political agenda. That was the word the president used. What was your take on that particular explanation?
So I definitely have to also respond to some of the points that he mentioned. And I think the first one also comes back to the bar that we have. The fact that, we can still mention that, okay, because the government did not send troops to close down
Indeed.
opposition media groups. Again, that's the kind of thing that shouldn't even be a consideration, right? So it's really this kind of thing where we should really be demanding more of our leaders across the bar. And I think that when it comes to this sentiment of the police officers who are also attacked, yes, that's true, right? And I know that part of the challenge that we are right now is the fact that we are almost working in this sense of us versus them, the citizens versus the police. And that sentiment is actually a problem because ultimately everybody is still Nigerian. We are still pushing for a better, more, a more progressive, more equal country. And I know, because I actually had been to the protest ground, at the beginning of the protest, that people kept mentioning to officers that, look, anything that we do, that we come out to speak for, also benefits you as well. So it's one of those challenges where it's not really a case of us versus them. Everybody benefits once there's that level of engagement. But the problem and the challenge now comes down to how we know that the government is actually listening and engaging. You mentioned accountability. For all intents and purposes, this government succeeded a government of the same party. So there's no issue in terms of saying, okay, fine, there's a completely different ideology. Part of the issue that comes down is now a case of saying, okay, fine, this is what we met, this is what we are doing, and this is how we are going to actually pivot going forward. Now, the president had a 1-year anniversary in May. We've also had a rollout of different policies that he's done, and the president did rightly mention some of the things that he had incorporated and tried to do to make things better. But I keep going back to the main issue, which is the optics of what it is that the president is actually trying to say. Where are the direct implications in terms of saying, okay, fine, this is what I understand as bad governance, this is how I'm going to address it. I've stressed repeatedly that the protesters were not as clear in terms of saying this is what we actually want to do. And the problem is that when that kind of thing happens, you have security agencies that now really go into this whole regime protection vibe where you're saying, okay, fine, let me actually make sure that the state and the government is actually protected because this could actually get into a very difficult mess. But the problem still comes down to, we don't know what the president and what the government believes is bad governance. We don't know if they agree with the sense that it actually is bad governance. And then we don't know what they're actually going to do to correct that. All the bulk of the speech that the president delivered on Sunday was geared towards what the government has been doing for the last 1 year. But then there's no clear impetus in saying, okay, fine, having listened to what you've said, having heard from the many different voices, this is what we will now do differently, or this is what we are going to change. Essentially, it was a case of saying, look, we've been doing this thing already, you either agree, or if you don't agree, we will make sure that you agree forcefully. And that's really where the challenge comes in. That's where, to a degree, the tone-deaf approach now comes in. And I'm very mindful that government might actually be doing a lot more than it is doing, right? We don't know, and there are things that we will not be privy to knowing about. But as far as we heard from the president, from the person who, let's not forget, went around the country repeatedly asking for this mandate, asking for the opportunity, being mindful that this is the scale and the challenge of what's going on, and said, I can deliver, I can do this, actually came into office. So it is only right, it's only fair that citizens can now hold that person to account when he came out to them and now they are coming to him to say, okay, fine, this is what's going on. But one point I want to add, which is that there's a challenge in terms of looking at where accountability is in the country, and you're right about that, because it's not just the presidency. You're also looking at governors too. The president made a point in the speech about how the allocations to state governors have not been higher than under his presidency, and that's something that we should actually pick up on. So, what are the governors in the different states doing about this? It's not just the center that is responsible for anything about bad governance. There are issues of state governors who might not have been as proactive or even as engaging as they need to be. And now with the recent ruling by the Supreme Court, local governments as well also have a responsibility to play. So what is important going forward is that, and this is the role that, that CSOs will do, that media also should do, is to make sure that citizens are aware of the fact that it's not just the presidency. There are different stages of accountability that we need to be much more active on and to really push on to really get that. But in terms of where the president could have really made a very big step, that step was missing. And that's really where the sadness is.
Indeed. All right, let's come back to Abdul'aziz. Abdul'aziz, you are a Nigerian first, and you're also from the northern part of Nigeria. The insecurity ravaging the country is something that Nigerians have been really concerned about, hence the reason why for the first time the northern part of Nigeria took the initiative to come out for protest. Based on what is going on, the Northern Elders Forum actually detached themselves from the beginning, said we're not going to be part of this protest. But after the president's speech, they came out to say we have concern about the president not addressing the insecurity issue, which is one of the strong points that the protesters have been bringing out. So what you said, you're part of the people that came up with this speech. Give us a sense of what perhaps Nigerians did not really look deep into the speech. Perhaps we did not give room to understand where the president is coming from, and also why the president did not address particularly security issues.
The most deepening issue or issues in this whole talk about protest are two things. One is the almighty or the omnibus word, bad governance. Then also the issue of hardship. And hardship is even more pronounced because, as I said, hardship is more cogent, even though still it's not really something that is very measurable. But then, so forget about bad and governance for a while. I'm not saying it's an issue, which maybe if I'm to respond briefly to Afolabi. So, like, if you said that you are if you are campaigning or talking about ending or like in bad governance, and then you have not made specific demands about, say, this or that, and then the president, even in the speech, made mention about the issue of accountability measures put in place to ensure judicious use of resources and blocking of leakages and all that, which he mentioned in the speech, and also how the government has used is using 100 billion recovered by EFCC, which is also an achievement, a concrete something from looters, that the government is now using it to back into the pockets of the people through capitalizing the student loans program, one wonderful program of the government, and the consumer credit scheme. So now back to the issue you mentioned. So now the main concern of the people, and I think the government as well, is the deepening cry about hardship, cost of living and all that. And that's why that is, if you look at it, largely the focus of the address, what the government is doing to address this issue. And let me correct you. You made a statement about the president maybe shifting accountability. Shifting blame. He didn't. In fact, one thing about the president that I know, that I sit with, listen to in events after events, is that he always says something which has become like even monotonous, that he is an accountant. And he knows that as an accountant, first he says that he campaigned, as Afolabi says, he never shy away from that I asked for this job. Even when he hosted the traditional rulers like 2 weeks ago, he's told them that I campaigned for this job and I am not giving excuses for it. I the box, as he said in the speech, the box stopped on his table. And he acknowledges that. And also he says often that he, as an accountant, he knows that if you take over an asset, or a property or whatever, you take the assets and the liabilities. So, and that is why this government has never liked to say, oh, we are in this problem as a government. Maybe some individuals could have said that, or as president. He has never come out to say we are in this mess because PDP or because the previous government did that or did not
this administration have done that. Let's be honest.
No.
That.
So, like what?
And one of the
major... give me who said that on what that?
The president actually even said that he inherited a bad economy.
Yeah.
It has...
that is generic. I'm talking about the issue of policy to say that maybe because of blame a particular person. If you say you inherit some, that is just like narrative.
The president has not, and even in this speech, the president did not tell Nigerians that I am to blame for this hardship.
No, for example,
he said Nigerians coming out for protest don't allow political agenda or political people.
That is your reading and misreading.
That was what the president said.
I'm talking about the text. No. Let's go back to the text. As I said, I'm more familiar with the text than you are. Let me tell you something. The president really said, I removed fuel subsidy. Didn't he say that? And he said, he used I twice to take the blame for the actions of removing fuel subsidy.
That was an acknowledgement, not a taking of blame.
Yeah. What does that mean? Please don't use no, excuse me. Don't use semantics. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And he acknowledged, even if let's use the word acknowledgement, which is a byword for taking responsibility. Excuse me.
Abdul'aziz, you did not still answer the security concerns.
I'm coming to that. I'm saying that the president was more particular because the whole cry, one thing that unites the country about this issue. In fact, even the note that you are talking about, I have seen Northerners come out to say, what do you mean that you are asking us to come out for protests and security, which is a major issue for us, is not included. Security is not included. So but one thing that unites everywhere, every part of the country, is this issue of hardship. And that is what the president explained. And he actually took the blame for the policy decisions. But he also explained that what government has done is to take away money from where the government feels is wasteful, is really not productive, to more productive endeavors. The money taken from subsidy are now being used. He enumerated a number of programs that the government is doing, which to shove up, to put more money into the pocket of people, to increase purchasing power of people, and to solve some of the problems, like, for example, the education, the student loans program, which is solving a particular problem which affects millions of families in Nigeria, that young people drop out of school because of inability to pay. Today, over 20,000 students in the first instance, have their fees paid by the government. But then you also mentioned some of these programs that are geared towards stimulating growth of the economy, because essentially what the main burden of our economy is production. Our overdependence, consumer.
Overdependence on import.
Even we're a consumer economy, kind of, not only import, but even within. So the government program are geared towards production, and that is what the savings from subsidy removal are used into that.
We'll come back to that, Abdul'aziz. Afolabi, people, even the government, called for dialogue, including the president. Do you think that is achievable? If there should be a dialogue, do you think there is a room for the government to listen to the people and at least come out with a better solution for the country?
So I think where the challenge comes in is that there is a responsibility on the part of governments to always reach out, to always be more proactive in terms of dialoguing with citizens, and it can take different methods. It can be through different town halls, it can be through engaging with different groups, it can be actively going on a listening tour, even to actually engage with citizens across different levels. And I think it is possible to dialogue, right? But there's also the emphasis on listening. right? So you're also giving and you're also taking back and internalizing what people have said. And like I mentioned earlier, the president said, I've heard your cries, I've heard this, I've heard that, but there's been no clear indication of what he actually heard, right? Or what government has taken on. When government says, we know why people came out to protest, we know what this means about bad governance, I sympathize with your plight, with the hardship and everything. There's no clear communication in terms of saying, okay, fine, now that I've taken this on board, how do I now correct and address this? And I think that that's where the gap is. That's where the communication gap is. You mentioned insecurity in the north, and that's something that many families and many people are definitely affected by on a daily basis. Part of the question now comes down to, okay, fine, how do I work on restructuring or retooling or even investing or supporting the different agencies that are responsible for that to be even much more effective? How do I make sure that I can hold them accountable? How will you know that if this actually gets to this particular stage, I can now say, okay, fine, we've crossed the Rubicon and we've made things much more successful. When it comes to the economy, and hardship, how are we internally evaluating and measuring our success? I think that part of the big challenge there when it comes to communication is in terms of saying where can we meet in the middle?
Yeah.
And ultimately, right, there's the political level to this, which is that in 2.5 years or 3 years, the president is likely to come again to Nigerians and say, give me a second term, give me a mandate. And for whatever reason, it might be that I didn't finish what I wanted to do at first because of this, but then now I know how to do this, or I've done well so far, give me a chance to even do more. When the president comes out, or when governors come out, or when anybody comes out to try to say, give us as a party or individuals another mandate, what would they be campaigning on?
Okay.
What would they say is the actual, where have they moved the needle from what they met and to where Nigerians are? And I feel like that's really where the big challenge now comes in terms of government communication. And if it's not done properly, then quite frankly, this is just a waste of time.
All right, Abdul'aziz, quickly in say 1 minute, the president said he's for all Nigerians, and whether we like it or not, some of these Nigerians are not really satisfied with what the president said. So what should Nigerians be hopeful for coming from the presidency? You've said you've had a one-on-one conversation. You know the president better than we do. So give us a reason why we should be more hopeful as Nigerians from the president.
One thing is that the president is visionary. And visionary means he knows and identifies long-term solution to our problems. For example, let me quickly give you a few examples. Like his own effort to stimulate our gas resources is a master stroke. If we are able to successfully, and we are on the path of that through the CNG initiative and all that, it will change a whole lot of things. That's a long-term investment. This consumer credit issue, people, for a long time, a lot of Nigerians wander in poverty or remain in the bottom because they could not muster the financial strength to own a house or buy a car and all that. But now there is that, and it will also help to curtail the urge for corruption, especially among civil servants. This student loans program, so it's something that is also a lifetime kind of change that will help a lot of people. And as he has always said, and I think it's a saying by one famous person, the president like using it, that there is no greater tool for fighting poverty like education. And with this, a lot of people will be liberated from because let me quickly digress. If you look at what has happened, the stark difference between what happened in some southern Nigerian states where protests took place and what happened in the north, it has given us a very grotesque, very bad picture of the issue of poverty and ignorance in Nigeria.
I cannot wait. I cannot wait for us to have more conversation.
These are some of the very visionary programs that are in the long term going to leave a landmark. A very huge landmark on the annals of Nigerian history. But also, he's compassionate. Sometimes I laugh if people say, "Please tell the president," and the president is listening, and he's also somebody who is always having conversation with people,
All right, I think
with
we'll
individuals,
stop. I think we'll stop
and
there.
he knows exactly
Abdul'aziz,
what's happening, and he's pained by it, and he's willing
hope-
to make concessions.
We truly hope the president would listen to the people and do right by the people at this point. But thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the program today, and hope to reach out to both of you to get to have more conversation, because Nigeria really needs the president to listen to them. Thank you so much, Abdul'aziz, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Afolabi.
Okay.